Hi, I'm Robin Worley, welcome to Lenscraft. Today I'm going to answer a question I've received quite a few times now. Which is better, DxO DeepPRIME or Topaz DeNoise AI? On the face of it, this seems an easy question to answer. Just load up a few sample files and compare the results. What could be easier? After all, both are noise reduction technologies and it shouldn't be difficult to compare the two. Except it isn't. There are quite a few differences between the two products, and these could make one product ideal for you or rule it out completely. DxO DeepPRIME is part of the Photolab RAW converter, where Topaz DeNoise AI is a dedicated noise reduction tool. Let's start with a quick test to check the performance, and I'll highlight some of the differences between the two products. I've already selected some RAW files to test with. These were taken with ISOs ranging from base right up to ISO 1600 and were shot using a Panasonic GX1 or an EM5, both of which are micro four thirds cameras. All the images display quite a bit of noise in the RAW files because of the lighting conditions. The reason that I'm starting with the RAW files is twofold. Firstly, I don't want to cloud the comparison by performing a RAW conversion first. Secondly, if you want to use DxO DeepPRIME, you must work with a supported RAW file. If you open a regular image file in Photolab, the DeepPRIME option isn't available. This is an important difference between DeepPRIME and Topaz DeNoise AI. DeNoise AI works with both RAW files and image files like JPEGs and TIFFs. For this test, I'm starting with an image I shot in Death Valley shortly after sunset. I was using a Panasonic GX1 at the base ISO setting of 160, so it should be reasonably clean. But if I look at 200% magnification along the horizon, I can see there's quite a bit of noise there. I'm starting with all the adjustments turned off in Photolab, and I'll only use two settings for the comparison. The first of these is the DeepPRIME noise reduction. When I turn this on, you don't see a preview of the results except for a small preview area which you can then position. DeepPRIME is very demanding and it would slow performance if the main preview image were constantly updated. The other setting I'm going to use is the lens sharpness module, which I'm going to leave at the default settings. I've decided to apply sharpening because Topaz DeNoise AI also applies sharpening as part of its processing. And whilst I could turn it off in both products, it would be good to see the comparison for the finished results. With the basic adjustments applied, I'll export the image as a DNG file, and I'll be doing the same in Topaz DeNoise to make my comparison. Of course, DxO Photolab is a complete RAW converter, so you have the other editing tools, which isn't the case with DeNoise AI. But to get the best performance from Photolab, it needs to support your camera and lens combination. If you're a Fuji X-T system user like I am, it doesn't support those files at all, but Topaz DeNoise does support them. Now let's look at Topaz DeNoise AI. You can use Topaz DeNoise either as a plugin for the likes of Photoshop and Lightroom, or you can use it as a standalone product. I'll be using it standalone to load and process the RAW files into DNG files. After launching DeNoise, I can drag and drop my RAW files onto the preview area to open them. The first decision I have is the noise reduction mode I want to use. There are currently 3 options and the results can differ quite a bit. The first is the standard DeNoise option, which produces good to excellent results with most images. There's then the AI Clear, which is fast but can be a little strong for some images, and you might also see some artifacts along edges. Finally, there is the low light mode, which is great for cleaning up high ISO, low light images. It's well worth checking each of these options with your image. One or possibly 2 of these options might be the best, and you might not be the ones you're expecting. Having picked the mode you want to use, you need to then adjust settings. Most of the time the auto setting works well, setting a good noise reduction and sharpening level. But sometimes you can improve on these settings, although you need to check around the image for problems if you change them. Whilst there aren't many controls, if you're trying to achieve optimum results, it can take a little bit of effort. This is quite different to Photolab, where you either apply DeepPRIME or you don't. The next thing I want to mention is batch processing, because you may have groups of RAW files that you need to process. Starting with Photolab, if I want to process multiple RAW files, I can select them as a group in the strip along the bottom of the screen. After that, I can apply my changes to the selected group of files. When I click the Export to Disk option, Photolab exports the selected files with the adjustments applied. Something else I can do to speed up processing is to save my adjustment as a preset. I then just need to click the Apply button to apply the preset to the selected images. Personally, I find this extremely quick and easy to do. Now let's compare this with the Topaz DeNoise AI. As before, I'll open the standalone version of the software. I can then load a group of raw files for processing. Next, I need to work through each image to select the settings I want to use. It's possible to select different settings for each image, and you'll see those reflected in the image list. I can then select the images in the list that I want to process and click the Save button. In the dialog, I want to create DNG files and save them to a custom folder which I'm using for the comparisons. In terms of processing time, I've found Topaz DeNoise slightly faster in processing some raw files, but there isn't much difference at all. Now let's examine the results in Lightroom, as it makes comparing the files easy. Looking at the thumbnails of the first image, I'm noticing the change in the colour and tone between the different versions. The original raw file and the DxO DNG files are quite close, but the DeNoise DNG file is different. It has more contrast and saturation, but interestingly, this isn't the same across all of the raw files. If I check these two files in the Develop module, I can see the DxO version has the Adobe Color Profile assigned, which is what I'd expect. But look at the Topaz version. It has a profile embedded, and I can't change it to the Adobe profile. Something else to notice is the white balance settings. The DxO file has the standard adjustment controls, where the Topaz DNG file has sliders you'd expect to see with a regular TIFF image. I don't know if this is significant, but I'm suspecting it isn't recognised as a true DNG file by Lightroom. Now let's select both images side by side. If we start with the clouds, both images are clean and noise-free, which is a good sign. Interestingly, the Topaz image seems to have a better cloud definition in the sky. But if we come down to the foreground, I'm immediately struck by how sharp the DxO image is. The Topaz image looks soft in comparison. At this point, I want to stress that I'm probably making an unfair comparison. I've assumed the default for both products would be about the same, but it looks like that could be wrong. Despite this, it's interesting to see how the clouds have better definition in the Topaz DNG file, but the ground is far better in the DxO version. I also found this to be the case with other Panasonic GX1 RAW files I compared. Now let's look at some of the higher ISO files to see if this pattern repeats. This shot of books on a shelf was taken at ISO 1600 with an Olympus EM5 camera. Unlike with the landscape shot we looked at, this time the Topaz version is dull and lacks contrast, where the DxO version is quite vibrant. Comparing the two at 100% magnification, both images are very sharp, but the DxO image appears slightly crisper. After a lot of comparisons and head scratching, I think the colour profile is part of the difference. Also, if you compare the histogram of the two images, you see the Topaz version has most of its tones now in the shadow areas. But I think this comparison is straying away from the point of the video, which is noise reduction. When I zoom into 200% magnification, you can see both images are completely clean and noise free. Let's look at another image, which is a high contrast scene shot at ISO 800. Again, the DxO image has more colour and contrast and appears sharper. This is something I found across all of the Olympus files I tested. Interestingly, the difference in sharpness isn't as great as with the Panasonic GX1 files which we looked at earlier. But this video isn't about sharpening, it's about noise reduction, and both the DeepPRIME and DeNoise AI are producing exceptional results. Out of interest, I decided to process the two DNG files in Lightroom a little bit further to add additional tone and sharpening adjustments. The results took me by surprise a little. Firstly, I couldn't make the two versions look the same in terms of colour and tone, which is probably down to the different colour profiles they have. But I then found myself preferring the colours in the Topaz version rather than any of the Adobe profiles. Secondly, by adding further sharpening to the Topaz image in Lightroom, I could match the detail in the DxO image, but the image appears less crunchy. At this point you're probably thinking, wow, he prefers the Topaz version. Unfortunately, the Topaz image isn't without its own problems. Look at the reflected window light on the table. In the Topaz version it's blown out and has strong colour fringing around it. Compare this to the DxO version where there's a lot more detail, less clipping and almost no colour fringing. I'm beginning to think this relates to my earlier comments about the Topaz DNG file not being recognised as a raw file. So where does this leave us in terms of comparing image quality? Both applications perform an exceptional job of cleaning up image noise, and I can't separate them on this point with the files I've tested. It may be there is a greater variation with RAW files from other cameras or at higher ISOs, but I haven't seen it yet. I have highlighted some differences in image quality, but again this probably isn't a fair comparison to make. With both products putting in such an excellent performance, how do you pick a winner? I think the answer to that comes down to your own workflow and needs. If you already use Photolab as your RAW converter, I can't see any sense in also purchasing Topaz DeNoise. If you have an earlier version of Photolab that doesn't include DeepPRIME, then you may want to consider an upgrade. If you use another RAW converter or you want to apply noise reduction after processing the RAW file, then Topaz is the choice. In short, I think you can trust both products to turn in exceptional noise reduction. To decide which to use, look at the other features discussed and how you want to use them in your workflow. I hope you found today's video helpful and please take a moment to share it with others. If you want to see more comparisons in the future, let me know in the YouTube video comments. I'm Robin Worley, you've been watching Lenscraft. I'll see you soon for another video.